Marvel fans, we are discussing the movie Eternals, and we are looking for spiritual themes in this film. So, we talked in a previous episode about the theology behind this film. There's a whole mix of ancient religions, Christianity, early Christianity, ancient Judaism, Mesopotamian, Babylonian religions, all of these lumped together to inspire the creator to make Eternals. And that theology is hidden in this film. So we're going to talk about it. There's some really cool stuff like from the book of Enoch that's hidden in the movie. We talked about what each type of being in the movie represents. Like, what do the Eternals represent? They're probably supposed to be something like angels. What do the prime celestials represent and the deviants and so on? You can hear that on our previous podcast. Now we're going to unpack that a little bit more as we look at some specific scenes in the movie and talk about our thoughts on the movie. So, before we dive in, I believe Doug is going to give us a quick recap of the plot. Are you ready?
I'm not, but I'm going to do it anyhow. The movie gets really, really deep. There's a lot of conversations, a lot of different stories. We're talking 10 main characters, not to mention the bad guys and all the side characters as well. So we're doing something a little bit different this week. We're going to give you just a quick synopsis of the movie. We're going to hit a few of the main parts of the movie and then cut it from there. Not going deep into the details, basically what happens is early Earth, humans are being attacked by what are called deviants, just these random monsters. So these 10 superheroes show up on a spaceship to save humanity from these deviants, and they are the Eternals. They live forever. As time moves on, they start to love humans, respect them, and they can't watch them fight each other, and basically they end up splitting up. They're told, all right, let's all just take a beat, step back, separate, and learn what we can about them, and we'll come back together 5,000 years from now or whatever and do this again. So anyway, cut to modern time where they think all the deviants have been killed, but just so happens they have not. There are some betrayals, there are some inner family fighting, some of the Eternals don't make it, and at the end, you come to find out that the Eternals were here to bring humans up to a population where they can power the birth of a new celestial that is growing inside the earth. And it's up to a handful of the Eternals to save the world. Spoiler alert, they do. So that is a quick, dirty synopsis of the movie. You can read reviews online. Personally, I liked it after a second and third viewing. There's a lot going on in there, but I think we'll talk more about that here in a bit.
Yeah. If you want a full detailed plot summary, there was so much stuff that I didn't understand on the first viewing. I would recommend going to imdb.com and read their detailed plot summary, because there was stuff that I read in there where I was like, oh, I did not catch that in the movie because the movie's going a million miles an hour. Basically, we thought they tried to shove a whole TV show worth of stuff into a 2.5 hour movie. And it was just too hard. We actually liked it. Like, I enjoyed it, but I was wondering, did you guys like the film better, one, on a second viewing, and two, better after knowing the spiritual themes?
I liked it.
I liked
the second time.
Better the second time. Yeah, I was able to pick up more than I did the first time. Definitely after discussing the spiritual themes that we saw, you recognize those a lot more. I'll give you my final verdict when we're done with the podcast.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Nathan said. I liked what they did in the 2.5 hours they had. It should have been an 8 to 10 hour Disney Plus series. They could have gone deeper into their stories. You could have become more invested in the characters, understand more why some of them did what they did and others did what they did. They just had too many stories to tell in too short of a time. But I did like it the
Yeah.
second time a lot more because you do catch on. You get to know the characters a little bit better too.
Right. And understanding the characters on the second viewing, that helped me a lot because the first time, like, I missed so many lines just because I didn't understand that character's storyline because they were all thrown together in a movie. It's kind of like what they tried to do when DC made Justice League. They tried to introduce most of the characters in that one film. It's like, wait a second. And it was just a little bit harder to connect with them. But I actually found on the second viewing, I liked the world. The first time, it was just too much information to grasp to really follow it. So let's dive into some specific scenes. So, in an early scene, Angelina Jolie's character, who was originally supposed to play Cersei, she is instead recast as Thena. And she has some kind of PTSD like
I think that's probably
thing.
the that's probably the best explanation of what it is.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. She basically has PTSD. And at some point during a battle, there's some gunshots that are going off, and some memories trigger, and they cause her to kind of lose her mind for a moment, and she starts to attack her fellow Eternals. So, what do you guys think the Mad Weary represents? What's the film saying by introducing something like
I
this?
think it's, well, one, like we said, it's just kind of that PTSD, and what we don't realize at the time when they first introduce this order that she has is that this isn't the first time that the Eternals have been sent to a planet to protect it. They've done it before. Population gets up to a certain point, basically planet dies, they move on to another planet and they have their memories wiped, so they don't remember all this stuff happening. So every time they go to a planet, they think this is the first time that we've ever done this. And they've been doing it over and over. All of a sudden, she's having these like weird like flashbacks in a way, which we don't see, which I wish they would have shown us some of this stuff. But in a way, it's kind of cluing you into they have done stuff like this before, maybe. Something's triggering that something happened on a different planet that they were on at one point. So I think that's kind of maybe some of the purpose of her doing that. It's just kind of a clue that they've seen a lot of stuff, and this is kind of one of the things that happens.
I was thinking the same thing. It's when they first introduce it, they could have introduced it a little bit better. Would have been nice to see maybe just a quick flash of her fighting a deviant, but on an obviously different planet, on a planet with huge skyscrapers, because, you know, obviously that hasn't happened yet on Earth. So why is she remembering this? See a flashback of that and then start going into it. I think that would have been a better clue. They were just kind of, that's one of the clues, basically. The first step of what's actually happening in this story. They don't give you much to work with.
They say in filmmaking, show don't tell, right? And they told us what she was seeing, but we didn't get to experience that. And I bet it was because they were trying to withhold the purpose of the Eternals until later, because they didn't want to reveal that Eternals are actually supposed to manage a population up to a certain point so they can basically die when this god is born to power the birth of this god. So I imagine it's because they probably didn't want to spoil it. On a second viewing, knowing what Mad Weary was, I noticed, oh, those gunshots triggered her. And that's what it was, because she's probably seen a whole planet die before. But it would have been cool later in the movie to see what she saw and just understand how traumatic that was for her. Because I like the concept that you've got this memory in your head and it's buried, and that it would be almost impossible for someone to handle that memory once. And then to have to do that over and over again as you basically go watch these different planets be destroyed. That's a really powerful storyline. But instead, they switch over to telling the answers to Mad Weary to Selma Hayek's character from Erisham. And so we never really see Angelina Jolie's mental images, I guess.
I'm curious, and no one really buys DVDs anymore, so I don't know where we can find this, maybe on YouTube. if there were any deleted scenes or maybe any footage of them possibly showing some flashbacks. It's probably just Angelina Jolie with a stick in a green room, but I'm curious if they had some ideas or if they were ever thinking about that.
Yeah, sometimes on like Disney Plus, they'll show deleted scenes and trailers and stuff like that. You'd probably have to buy the Blu-ray for it, but again, that's something that had, like, you guys mentioned, if this was a TV show, a 10-episode show, they could have dove into that a little bit more, or at least at the end of this movie, explain it by showing a few flashbacks. Like once the big secret was revealed.
Yeah. Well, they didn't even show any of those flashbacks during her big fight at the end with the head deviant, right? The memories that she's wrestling with are memories that like no human being should have to hold, right?
Right.
I think I mentioned this Batman comic book before. After the Rest in Peace storyline by Grant Morrison, there was this comic where the villains caught Batman and put him in this tank, and they were trying to clone him. So they had all these clones. They wanted to make an army of Batman. So they were trying to download Batman's memories and then upload them instantly into the clones so they'd have all these Batmen. But uploading those traumatic memories, I mean, he had a lifetime to process everything that he went through. Well, when they instantly uploaded those into the clones couldn't take it. So they scratched their eyes out and they basically killed themselves. There's a similar storyline in this film. Like a human being on a spiritual level is not really designed to see a bunch of planets destroyed. So the only way they could be eternal was to have their memory wiped or they'd go crazy. So it's a really cool idea.
That's interesting.
It's just barely explored.
Yeah, they could have definitely hit a little bit more in that. But again, I don't think they realized when they were shooting this how well received a lot of these Disney Plus shows were going to be, at least a few of the beginning ones.
You think that if they knew what they know now, they would have started out writing those for Disney Plus instead?
Yeah.
They've got mostly lesser known actors here. You might lose Angelina Jolie and Salma Hayek, but they're not really main characters, so really the core of the film could still be intact as a TV show.
They might have signed on to do this. Yeah. I think with the success that those shows are having on Disney Plus, I could see them probably signing on for that. I mean, there's a lot of shows out there right now with big name actors who are doing shows on streaming services right now. Harrison Ford's doing one for that Yellowstone spinoff. Kevin Costner's doing a streaming TV show. So it's kind of becoming a thing to do. Maybe they would have signed on for it.
Yeah, I could see there being a stigma that's slowly being broken down that Disney Plus or TV is lesser. But, I mean, given that films in the theaters are struggling, maybe that stigma is slowly going away.
I do like going to the theaters, but you do run into the fact that you just can't sit there for 4 or 5 hours in a theater. So it's hard to tell those really deep stories. And I think with a lot of these Marvel shows and maybe with Star Wars and these legacy shows, I think you're going to see a lot more of that happen on streaming services because you can tell those longer, deeper stories and then bring in the Avengers or bring in a Star Wars movie that brings everyone together and has one big fight. And that way you don't have to tell a long story. You just have to be like, oh, I'm here, so am I. How'd you get here? Because of this guy. And boom, boom. All right, let's fight. Go. Everyone loves it. Tell the story online or on streaming services so you can get every ounce out of it and then bring in and do Avengers, Justice League, Star Wars movie or trilogy or something. Do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll see a lot more of that coming out.
In Eternals, there's actually an interesting theme about spiritual beings guiding humans, helping them learn technology. Well, that theme actually comes from ancient religion. It's from the book of First Enoch in the Mesopotamian religion. There were these gods or angelic beings that helped teach humans to build the plow and advanced technology. And there's sort of a loose idea of this in the Bible when it comes to something called the territorial gods. The idea that after the nations were scattered at the Tower of Babel, different angels were put over different countries basically to watch over them until they decided to come back into the family that God was creating. So they're basically assigned a guardian angel. So it's an interesting idea. In the book of Enoch, when these spiritual beings try to influence humans, they're basically fallen angels. When they try to influence humanity, they are villainous. But in Mesopotamian religion, when these angels try to guide humans, they're trying to help them. They make some mistakes, but they're trying to give them technology. They're trying to help humanity along. And that idea shows up in this film. There's a scene where Selma Hayek's character is talking to Fastos, and he wants to give the people the steam engine. She says, no, it's too early. So then he's like, oh, fine, I'll give them the plow. Did you think this concept was interesting, and did you know that it actually came from ancient religion, or did you just think it was a cool idea they put into the film?
When it comes to a lot of comic books, a lot of stories, just about any story has come from somewhere. So I've seen situations in shows or movies where there is a being, or whether it be an alien or a god or an angel, or in this case, a superhero that helps advance human beings. I think wasn't 2001, wasn't that the whole thing where the aliens drop the pillar and then the monkey picks up the bone and kills the other monkey, and he invented the first weapon, so...
Yeah, the monolith teaches them weapons of war. That idea is straight out of the Book of Enoch.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. But, 2001, I don't remember when the first Eternals comic book came out. So did the Eternals take it from 2001 that took it from the Book of Enoch? That seems more likely, personally. But
well, Jack Kirby was trying to explore religion. He was trying to explore man's origin, but he goes all the way through the flood story. So he may have read about ancient religions, and who knows what he was reading.
Mm-hmm. It's a good idea. I loved it. I love that, it wasn't somebody whispering in the back of somebody's ear, hey, try this. No, it was like, oh, here, I invented this for you today. Try this. It's called the plow. It plows. So yeah, that was kind of cool. And that's what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to protect us as well as help us evolve. Yeah, it was kind of cool seeing them bicker a little bit and say, oh, hey, this is too early for the steam engine. Let's do this instead. So that was fun.
Have you thought about the idea of humans having guardian angels over the nations before? Like, is that a wild idea? Or have you ever thought about anything like that? Because a lot of people believe in spiritual beings, but I think since we don't really see them very often, we don't really think about what they might be doing. But if you think about it, they probably have roles or jobs or something, right? So have you ever thought about that idea of angels having some kind of impact or influence, even if it's just subtle or a little, on our world?
So it got me thinking with all the different religions that they're pulling from here. And I don't know much about, like saints. You have like saint such and such as the saint of this. You know what I mean? In a way, like I said, I don't know much about it, but I guess in a way, isn't that like, they have that particular, if you're the saint of dancing, you helped people dance or something. I don't think there's a saint of dancing, but I'm just saying, but like, is that kind of the same thing here?
It could be similar. The difference would be like these angels, they were beings that were never human. So a saint would be a person who died and now maybe they're watching over the earth. That's technically not an angel. So they might, I don't know, maybe they do something like that. I'm not sure. But there would be some other kind of being, like an angel, that would have a task to manage or kind of guard humanity or something.
Doing that particular thing for an entire, like, said continent or country or whatever. I think when I think of guardian angels, I always think of like each person has their own personal guardian angel that helps you along. Not like one that's, I'm taking care of this whole nation.
Yeah. Well, I have a feeling that this idea would be brand new to a lot of people who read the Bible or who are Christian. And they might think, oh, I've never heard that. That's not in there. So I'm just going to tell you a couple things to look up. You can see it in the book of Daniel. You can kind of see this in action because Michael, the archangel, he's basically traveling to another territory, and you can see some spiritual warfare go on. Read Psalm 82 and read Deuteronomy 32, but read it in the ESV version, because in the NIV version, some of the stuff about the gods, which are the angels, the manuscript that the NIV was translated off of is corrupted in a couple places. And one of them is this verse. So the stuff about the angels, it got changed to be about Israel. But the ESV has the original translation from the Dead Sea Scrolls. And basically, in Deuteronomy 32:43, God is warning the other gods not to mess with humans or he'll punish them. So in the corrupted version, it reads like God's warning the other nations, don't mess with Israel or I'll destroy you. Well, in the original, he's actually warning the other angels, like, do not corrupt them, do not mess with them, or you will be judged. So it's protecting humanity. And I think that kind of goes with what you see in the film, except in this film, the god, the prime celestial, isn't really pro-human. He's pro-Tiamat because they're trying to birth this other god. So he's maybe neutral towards humans, or they're just kind of a means to an end or food. Whereas in the Bible, God loves humans and is trying to help them along so they can be a relationship with him rather than be eaten or absorbed by Tiamat.
Yeah, I agree. I think in this case, humans are just more of they're a necessity, and then they serve their purpose, and then I got no need for them anymore. So, that's all it is.
Well, that portrayal in the movie is closer to some of the other ancient religions. Like in Babylon and Mesopotamia, they never knew if the gods were like going to destroy them or not. They weren't sure what their relationship was with them. The thought was, in their beliefs, that the gods made humans to be their slaves. So that seems a little bit closer. Like they got sick of making their own food and taking care of the land. So that portrayal seems to influence this movie quite a bit too.
I can see that.
But these Eternals here, they could either be here to help or to hurt, as you mentioned, that they had these, depending on which religion you were looking at, right? In a way, did the Eternals actually end up doing some things that would, in the end, hurt humans by, like helping them develop an atomic bomb? It's not necessarily the positive thing there. That's destruction right there. That is a weapon to kill.
Well, that's why Fastos got mad and ended up quitting. And I don't think he invented the bomb. I think he gave them, the idea to tinker with things, and here is plutonium or whatever they use in the bomb. Plutonium they use in Back to the Future. But whatever they use, you can use this for power, you can use this for this, and humans being humans, like, oh, we can also use this to blow stuff up. Again, it's a really short scene they show in this, but they show Fastos sitting there mad, sitting there after Hiroshima and just crying that it's his fault this happened. At least he feels it's his fault.
Mm-hmm.
And Ajax is there trying to tell him it's not. This is just the way life progresses and things like this happens. And it's like, I'm done. He quit. I think all of them love humans in one way or the other. I think just a few of them care for him a little bit more than some of the others.
I mean, like, you think Icarus might still like humans, but...
Yeah, they have a job to do.
Oh, absolutely.
That's not to get emotionally attached.
I didn't see him have any disdain for humans. It wasn't like he was just flying around lasering people's heads off or anything.
We're not really sure the reason that he left Cersei. Do you think it had something to do with like his laser focus on the mission? Because it seemed like he did love her. He pursued her, but after that battle at Tenoctolon, they all split separate ways. And I took it in the film that he left her then, even though he had married her, he went off on his own. And I never quite figured out why. But do you think it's because he learned the true intent of the mission and he was maybe a little bit disturbed and couldn't share that with Cersei, so he just left?
I don't think he knew the true mission until later on.
I thought Ajax told him. I thought he said sometime.
Oh, maybe I missed that. Maybe he did. I mean, personally, I just think that Icarus is a jerk. I just don't. I mean, I don't like him. I did not like. I just think he's a jerk.
I liked him early in the film.
I thought he left because he's a 100% rule follower. And Ajax said, everyone split up. I thought, and I could be wrong, please comment, let us know, but I was thinking that even when Cersei asked him at one point later on in the movie, he was like, Ajax ordered us to.
Yeah.
Because that's what, that was the orders. It was like, oh, we have to split up? Okay, sorry, wife.
He's definitely a rules follower, and I mean, that even shows up even more later on in the movie, that he knows what the mission is and what their purpose is, and he is going to stick with it. So I think Doug is right on that. I think he was ordered to go their separate ways, and he just did what he was told to do.
So in this movie, when they talk about the birth of Tiamat, when I read the plot summary on IMDb, it said the seed of Tiamat is in the planet. And so for a while I was thinking about, so like a plant seed? Like, did they dig a hole and put the plant seed? And I was like, wait, are they talking about like, biological seed?
Yeah, I don't know how he got there, but
I don't know. How does a god be conceived in this universe? Like, how did the planet get pregnant? Did someone...
Well, didn't they show it?
Well, I guess that actually probably goes back to...
I don't think they did.
Did they show it?
I was thinking when he was telling Cersei the plan, when she was holo-Skyping with him, he was showing how, I remember seeing something going down and into the planet.
It must have been the
I
seed.
was thinking it was, yeah.
Well, that's weird. Like, did they create an egg or something? Because, like, in Greek mythology and all these old ancient religions, when they're trying to figure out how the gods were born, they just looked at humans and how they were created, and they applied that to the gods. So, for the most part, like, a god was always born by intercourse of some form. So that's why I was like, well, where'd they get this seed? And is it like, the seed of a god, or is it like a plant seed?
Well, I mean, they're celestials. Does that actually make them gods?
I think that's what they represent.
Well, I was thinking there was somebody above them. I mean, you still got Kang, who controls all of time, so are the Celestials part of that timeline? Again, it gets so deep into Marvel. Like, they're doing a great job with how deep these stories are going.
Kang's human. Kang the Conqueror?
Yeah, but he's also immortal, or not immortal, but kind of immortal. I don't understand the Kang, because there's multiple variants of Kang. Did you watch Loki?
I have not seen
Oh,
Loki.
you got to watch Loki, dude, because it basically introduces Kang. They get to the end game, and Kang is sitting there in the middle of the timeline, and he controls it.
Well, that's interesting, because he's created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby is one of the guys behind the Eternals, so I could see some overlap there. But I don't know if Wiki's right or not, but it says his species is human, so maybe somehow he gained immortality.
Yeah, I don't...
But Erisham in this movie is the prime celestial, right? So it seemed to me like he's either the head honcho overall, or in this universe, at least.
But is he a god? I don't know. Because, again, I don't know the hierarchy, because you got the... let's see, we met one of them in the last Thor movie.
The only thing I can go off of is that Tiamat was inspired by the god Tiamat in Babylonian and Mesopotamian writings, who was a god. So I took it they're equals, but that's the only official
Yeah, again, I don't know who outranks who.
I just kind of looked them up. Okay, so I guess with the fictional history of the Celestials, apparently there was one being at creation, and it was by itself.
But what was that, a being, or was that the universe itself?
Creation was composed of a single and sentient universe whose omnipotent intelligence was referred to as the first firmament. So it was a universe that was like self-aware, and they got bored pretty much, and it decided to create life. So it created life, and then that life created more life, for servants. So that's kind of how that broke down. He had loyal beings called aspirants, and he was pleased by what they were doing to maintain the status quo of his reign. But then he had the multicolored ones that were completely different values and desires. They were called rebels first, and they wanted a dynamic, diverse, and continually evolving reality where beings lived, learned, reproduced, aged, and died in that order to slowly improve themselves through evolution. And those rebels eventually became known as Celestials.
So they were like fallen angels, but like a rank above.
Exactly, because
they're rebelling against
life
the
to
original
go through the whole life
God
span. Born, evolve, die, reproduce, keep going. So that's what they are.
Huh. But then in this movie, they want to kill them all.
Yeah.
So they can make more gods. Huh.
So they can make more and continue evolving.
It's what it sounds like.
So when the Celestial destroys a planet, absorbs all the humans, that Celestial might then make another planet.
It makes billions of other planets. That's the thing.
And populates them all.
When a Celestial is born, it creates millions and billions of other planets, and then it oversees all of those.
Yeah.
So it basically creates a universe.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a quasar sucks in a universe into a black hole and then blows it up into a new universe. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting, because that means if the Eternals stop Tiamat from being born, they save humans, but they do kill Tiamat. I don't necessarily think it's super compelling that, they prevented these other universes from coming into an existence because they saved current life, but they did kill Tiamat. So like no one gets away clean without killing someone in this scenario, right? Because Tiamat gets turned to stone, but I take it that he died.
Well, they said they were going to put him to sleep. So, I mean, I guess that's one way.
But I figure he turned him to stone. Yeah, maybe do you think he died, or do you think he was just...
I think he's gone. I don't think there's a chance for him coming back on Earth. But
it's the MCU. Anybody can come back at any time.
But for our purposes, he's probably dead, right?
Well, he's
like they killed him.
More than likely going to get mined, because, and this is why I think they rushed the Eternals into a movie, is because I think Tiamat is where they're going to get the adamantium to build Wolverine in the MCU. Oh. I was thinking that they were thinking they wanted to bring the X-Men in maybe sooner, and to do that they had to find out how to make I keep messing up the word.
Adamantium.
That. I think that's why they kind of rushed this movie out, because they needed that.
Do you have any background knowledge on that, or is that just a theory? Because that's a good theory.
It's a theory I've heard online. That's not my theory. It's a great theory, and I'm going along with it. But yeah, I think that's where it's going. So I think that's why the movie was rushed out into a movie instead of a longer TV show and really getting into the stories.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when we look at Arisham's real plan, Cersei has a scene where she finds out what Arisham is really doing. Like, he tells her the plan, basically. And Ajak went through a dilemma where she felt uncomfortable with Arisham's plan, the god of this universe in this story, where she felt uncomfortable with that plan. And I thought that was interesting. What do you guys think about that?
It's a great way to keep us alive so they can keep making comic books.
It's a good dilemma, though, right?
Yeah, it's self-affirming, kind of. It's like, hey, out of the billions of other planets that has gone through this, most of these guys thought we were pretty cool and worth saving. Out of the other infinity amount of play, we were the cool ones. So yeah, I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, it's one of those stories where the person who doesn't have feelings, who they're there for a reason, then opens up their hearts and realizes what they're doing needs to change. So it's a good story.
Yeah, because we're told they're robots. So the fact that they develop feelings, they obviously must be pretty advanced.
Worked for Johnny Five.
I think this movie, it might not be the best movie to explore the idea of, is God good or evil?
Yeah.
Because, we've got kind of an evil or a cold or detached God in this movie. But it is an interesting dilemma to pose, because I know a lot of my peers, they don't know what to do with religion or what they see of religion or the Old Testament. And so they are kind of wrestling with, well, if there is a God, what is that God like? Is he good? Is he bad? And I did think it was interesting to see that in the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think our God's a little bit nicer in this one, though.
A little bit.
Yeah. Let's talk about Droog a little bit here, because he's the one who really starts to get attached to humans. So if you've got these cold, angels who are robots who are supposed to manage humans in a detached way, like, he's the one who can't stand watching them fight. And so he'll try to start intervening. And like that one scene where he makes those guys stop fighting in some ancient city, and he makes them smack themselves, and then they're all like, hooray! And they all start partying. That was pretty funny. What do you think about what he goes through in terms of...
He was the first one of all the Eternals, I think, to really start showing that compassion a little bit more. I think they all had a little bit of an attachment to who they were supposed to be protecting, but he seems to be the one who was really very protective of the humans. Watching them fight wars just absolutely tore him up. Like, he could not handle it. The other ones were in the back going, we can't do anything about it. They have to kind of solve these problems. And he's thinking, we're here to help them and protect them, and they're just killing each other. And I can make this stop with the snap of a finger. And why won't you let me protect them like I'm supposed to? Yeah, so he just basically just eventually just has enough of it. But I liked seeing that little bit of diversity amongst that group, because they all were kind of doing the same thing. And here's this one guy who's kind of seeing that them killing each other is just not right. This can't be what they're intended to do. This cannot be part of their evolution.
I was going to say, it's got to be hard as well. I mean, if you think about it, I've had a pretty decent life. I'm not a millionaire or anything like that, but I've got a lot of good friends, got a great family, but I've seen a lot of bad stuff as well. I've gone through some bad stuff, and I'm not quite 50 yet, but take that times 500, 1,000 times. We're talking 1,000 years has gone by, and he's gone through that. Every single generation that comes through, they're fighting, and he knows that all he has to do is go and everything's fixed. And to see that constantly, where you, like Drew said, snap of the finger, he can make things stop. It's got a weigh on a mind.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's like the opposite of Ra's al Ghul in the Batman universe, because Ra's is like 600 something years old, and he's lost love, and he's become cold and detached because of it. But Druig is the opposite here. And I do think it's a really interesting idea. How many lives could you live and go through the trauma of living here on Earth before you either go crazy, or you can't take it anymore, or you become cold and detached? Would you want to live multiple lives, like 300 years? Or
I don't think I would.
Absolutely.
You would?
I'd try it. I would.
Maybe I'm morbid, but I'm like, one life is enough.
No. I don't want to. I've seen some of the stuff that I've had to see, and it's just, in my opinion, sometimes I just think things are just getting worse and worse, and it's just nothing but fighting, and it's nothing but arguing, and it's nothing but it's us and them, and it just drives me insane.
Don't drag me in with you, man.
Yeah, I know, but it's just like, it's enough. Enough's enough.
Well, I feel you.
I can definitely see where he's coming from. And I think that's why I like this character a little bit more, because I get sick and tired of seeing the same stuff over and over. It's like, why are we fighting over this stuff again? Why are we doing this?
You just want to hijack people's Facebook accounts and then change their posts, kind of like what Druid does.
Yeah.
Calling names immediately, or it's just enough. Had it.
Yeah, we're all living Droog's life in like a micro form.
Yeah.
On the internet.
Yeah. Now take that times,
Yeah.
like I said, 50, 500, 1,000, just living that every generation. So, yeah, I can see him just finally cracking and being like, you know what? I'm done. I'm taking these people. We're going to the woods and chilling out for the rest of eternity. See ya.
I wonder if angels really feel like that, or like God. Because, it's like a popular misnomer in Christianity that angels don't have free will.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. But I don't see that at all when I read the Bible. Especially, it's confusing when you read the Old Testament because sometimes they translated, the word you'll see is the gods with a lowercase g. That's basically what we equate with angels today. But back then, technically, angel just means messenger. It's not the type of being. So in the Old Testament period, they called them the gods. And when I look at it, I think they have free will, which is part of why I found this movie so interesting, because you see the Eternals make some bad choices too. And you see Icarus decide he's going to be against humans, basically. And it's almost like the same thing. It's like, oh, they all had a choice. This movie wouldn't be the same if there wasn't infighting there while they're fighting this bigger celestial being. All of that, I think, comes from ancient religion, their idea of the gods and angels, because not all angels were for humans. I mean, the whole premise in the Garden of Eden was Satan decided it wasn't such a good idea that God created humans, so he decides he's going to try to get rid of them. And you can see not quite that storyline, but Icarus is definitely for getting rid of the humans here because Tiamat has to be born in his mind, right?
And again, I don't think he's bad. And that's something I've seen, and we've talked about this a few times in comic book movies. It's not just Lex Luthor anymore. It's not like, I want this, I must take. Icarus turns out to be the bad guy of the movie, but he's not a bad guy. He's
indifferent,
following rules, and the rest of them find compassion and things like that. But equate that to a soldier's life. You got two soldiers, and 12-year-old kid comes running at you with a rifle. Soldier A hesitates because it's like, I can't shoot this kid. Soldier B is like, it's my duty to keep my friend, my compatriot, and myself alive, and my orders are to kill any bad guys. So compassion goes out the window. This is what I'm doing. So that doesn't make him a bad person. It's just a different opinion, state of mind. So
that's the conundrum of the Vietnam War. Yeah.
Yeah. In that miniseries Band of Brothers, which by the way is amazing. If you haven't seen that, you need to watch that. But
one of the greatest.
They always interview some of the guys who are being portrayed in the movie before every episode. One of them was talking about he was parachuted in on D-Day, spent some time over in Europe fighting, and he said, I'm fighting these enemies, and he's like, who knows? Under other circumstances, we may have been like best friends. We could have been fishing together and had stuff in common together. But his job over there was to do what you have to do to survive. If that means, and this guy was a sharpshooter, so he had his share of kills. But he's like, I always sat there and would think, like, after we'd have a battle, that like these guys that I just I disagree with, or we're on different sides, we're just doing our jobs is all we were doing. And that's kind of what Doug's saying with Icarus. He's just doing his job, so he might not necessarily be bad. That's just the side that he's on.
And you got to look at it from a different point of view. We're looking at it as humans. The rest of them are saving us, so yay them. But now that we are saved, the however many billions of us, there are now billions of planets not being born. Take our planet times a billion, and that's how many beings are now not being born because a small group of people decided not to do their job. So,
Yeah.
Who is the bad guy? If you really look at it, it's like, do you sacrifice one to save 50,000, 100,000, a million, 6 billion to save 6 billion times 6 billion?
Are they thinking that maybe they don't need the gods to go on in the universe anymore? Like if they can learn how to planet hop and populate another planet, that begs the question of, could they potentially just get everybody off planet and then everything will be okay? I figure if a planet blows up, you probably can't go to any of the neighboring planets either.
There are no neighboring planets that humans could live on. So, we'd have to go to one of Star-Lord's planets.
This obviously takes place after, the Avenger films, where Thanos has already eliminated half of the galaxy, right? So that means, is that half the population on Earth was gone? So...
Well, half the population everywhere.
Okay, so...
And every planet.
This is a question that I had, and it drove me nuts. Because I think this movie starts off like 6 months after the Endgame. So you're trying to tell me in 6 months that the Earth repopulated enough to trigger this again?
Well, remember, everyone came back.
They did. They went back and they did a lot of stuff. That's right.
Yeah, they actually talk about that in the movie.
I've seen them all, but it's been a while, so I had to stop and think. So when I was first watching it, I was thinking, wait a minute, if half their population just got wiped out, how did they all of a sudden get back up to it again in 6 months?
It's because everybody made babies because they're like, oh, we got to repopulate the planet. And then they undid the snap. So all those people who disappeared came back.
That's right. All right.
And there's even more people. And now it's time for Tiamat to be born. Let's talk about the Unimind and what that represented. So I thought it was super interesting that the Eternals are divided on whether or not they're going to save humanity and destroy Tiamat, but they actually all participate in the Unimind, even though they disagree, to kill Tiamat. So what did you think about that? What did you think the movie was trying to say there? What do you think that symbolized on a spiritual level, if anything?
It was interesting because it did grab everyone. At the end when the Unimind activated, it wasn't just like, I volunteer. It was like, it's going to hit all of the Eternals, and it even grabbed Icarus and Sprite, who were kind of the against it type.
Everybody but the actor, right?
Correct, yeah. So everyone that was near it, I should say. Of course, I don't know. It didn't show him. Maybe he was on the other side of the world and all of a sudden just...
In the middle of one of his Bollywood productions, he just started freaking out. We don't know what happened.
Yeah. And it worked out great, and we left it in the movie. That'll be a joke in the next time you see him. Watch. What it represents, I mean, you could say it represents teamwork, but is it? Because two of them weren't a part of the team. It's like bringing all the lines together to form Voltron.
Well, for Icarus to participate, that I thought was interesting because I did not expect him to join in. And even Sprite.
I don't think they had a choice. I think the device that Phastos made it where it grabbed you and you were a part of it. Because...
man, I thought it was part of a redemption story.
I didn't think so, because Icarus ended up flying into the sun when he was done because he was so mad that he did not finish his mission.
When he breaks his restraints and he goes to kill Cersei, and he can't do it because of the love that he has for her. So I don't think he had much of a choice. I think that's kind of why he just kind of gave in and joined in, so that she wouldn't die, so that the other Eternals, these friends that he's had forever, didn't die. And he takes off and he flies into the sun because I think he had a little bit of remorse and a little bit of guilt about how he may have acted. Maybe it wasn't so much about not finishing the actual mission. It was about, I just fought with my friends, and he killed Ajak in a way. I mean, he's responsible for her death. And I think he's got a lot of guilt about that. And that's why he just kind of banishes himself out of that guilt.
Well, that's how I took it too, because we forget that because it's not very developed, that Cersei's his wife, and now his wife knows that he killed Ajax. That's got to be hard. No matter what happens, his wife knows that he's a murderer at this point. And I thought I thought he participated because he was like, it's over. They've won. I might as well,
Yep.
one last act of redemption, maybe. I might as well join in on this and help them because they're going to win. But I don't know. I don't know if I'm right. But I do think that's why he flew into the sun, because he was like, I've messed up my life so bad
Yeah.
that I cannot make it better now, which is sad. But I think part of the reason they went that route is because the god that he is based on is Icarus from Greek mythology, who flew too close to the sun and died.
I think that's the reason.
Which I wish I'd remembered that before, because I would have known what his end was going to be.
I think he just had a lot of guilt about some of the things that he had done, and that he, instead of protecting and fighting alongside these people he's been with for centuries, he ended up trying to kill him. And it's like, I can't live with that. So,
do you think the group would have forgiven him? I don't know.
I don't think
he would have had to be in prison for a while.
Yeah.
Eternal prison.
Do they have that?
They could have just wiped his mind.
Harisham could have.
Just send him back to Erisham. Then he's still alive, but he loses all those memories and he doesn't have to cope with it. See, he basically has Mad Weary, but from this life.
Oh, I got 2 of them.
You don't need another one.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting that the reason the Unimind worked was because Tiamat initiated it. Did you know that? I didn't catch that. I think I caught the line in the movie, but I forgot about it. And then I was reading the plot summary on IMDb, and I'm like, oh my gosh. That paired with, they're all on different pages on this thing, but they all still combine to make this Unimind. Did Tiamat just initiate it to try to be born? Because that's how this works? Or what?
Did he activate it on purpose, or did he activate it because he was being born? It was his energy of coming out of ocean or wherever they were that activated.
Well, I assume it's the latter.
I was thinking it was just his power. It wasn't like he was like, I'm going to turn this on and see what happens. It was just his power coming up, the energy that was coming off of him activated the Unimind and gave it the power it needed to work properly. That's the way I took it.
I don't know. You're probably right. There's not a whole lot of lines about it, but an alternate, I'm going to say this is a fan take because it's probably wrong, but what if he had activated the Unimind because he had, and he's a fetus, so I guess that doesn't make any sense, but he had compassion for humans, so he activated it to destroy himself.
Yeah. It's interesting, but I don't think so.
But it's interesting.
It's interesting. It's possible.
It's a what if.
That's how you can justify him. He's not just taking in the energy. He's taking in all the memories, all the ideas and stuff. And then when he explodes and creates those billions of other planets, their evolution will happen much easier because we've learned from these mistakes. So let's not do that on these billion planets.
Oh.
So maybe he is, again, it's all theory. Unless they literally came out and said, yes, this is what happened. You can take it how you like.
Yeah.
Which is basically what our podcast is,
The memories are encoded in the new universe.
Possibly.
Or in the new life there. That is super interesting. So it's like quasar theory and Big Bang, how they think universes are born, paired with intelligence passing from a dying universe into a new one. That is quite fascinating. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's fictional, but but it's interesting. I wondered if the whole Unimind thing was supposed to be a commentary for the times. Because if you think about when this was probably filmed, it was 2020, and it was that year we were having riots and we were going through COVID. I had never seen humanity so divided in my life before. And I mentioned on a previous podcast, I think, I was watching a Facebook Live in New York, and it was showing some of the riots. and business owners coming out and getting like beat to death. I mean, it was disturbing. And I almost wondered if the Unimind was supposed to be some kind of statement about coming together, especially if you've got different people from different views within that Unimind. I don't know if it was just me reading that into the film or if they were actually trying to make some kind of statement about moving forward as a people.
Again, you could take it that way. You could take it as them just coming together as a team finally, again, for the first time in thousands of years. Is it a coincidence it happened right after all of this craziness that we went through, or in the middle of it where they're like, okay, well, all this crazy stuff, let's finish up with something strong, something that brings us together, and they came up with the Unimind. Or maybe the Unimind was in the comic book and they just went by that. So I don't know. Like I said, I've never read the Eternals, so I'm not sure.
Well, not many people have because it didn't last very long. So you're not alone. Is there anything else that you want to talk about in this film? Any other characters or scenes?
I was curious about the sign language that was being used in this movie because we have a character who signs, and is she using American Sign Language, or are they just making stuff up for the movie? Because if it's actual ASL, how is she doing that 500 BC? Again, the little things. There's little things that kind of bothered me, and maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Well, that bothers me from the beginning. Is why make an eternal, somebody who's going to last forever, who can't communicate?
Oh, well, this is an odd source, but Tech Radar says Eternals created entirely new sign language specifically for that actress.
Okay. But Doug does make a good point, though. If you're going to send beings to a planet to help protect it, shouldn't that being be able to communicate?
Yeah. So she was a robot, so she was built deaf.
Yeah, and I don't know if the character in the comics is like that. I could actually try to look that up real quick.
That is odd. Like, why would you make a robot that can't hear? I do know, just on a different level, my wife, since she has some hearing loss and she's a sign language teacher, I mean, she was really excited to see this movie because she knew it was going to have the first deaf superhero in it. So she thought that was really cool. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're right. On a logical level, it is interesting.
She was in it for like 4 minutes.
I mean, I could see her being in like Justice League, but being a robot, I mean, she was probably built.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't say, but apparently. Okay, so looking up the character history in the comic history, the character was actually a male to start with, super speed, and it says actually got involved with human affairs more often than the other Eternals. It didn't say anything about the character being deaf. So I think the reason that obviously, deaf in this movie is the actress who portrayed the character is deaf in real life. So I think that's why they kind of switched it around a little bit there.
Interesting. So they gave Druig some of her traits.
Intervening with humans, yeah.
There was one other character I wanted to talk about because I feel like this piece of the movie is one of those things that would have been really developed in a TV show, but in the movie really got the short end of the stick. It's Crow. We've got this deviant who killed Gilgamesh and then basically became self-aware, like absorbed the ability to speak, and he was angry at what the Eternals had done to his species because obviously the Eternals were sent to the planet to wipe out the deviants, because the deviants were supposed to just wipe out dinosaurs and things like that, but they were supposed to protect humans, but they turned on them. That's interesting because here you've got deviants aren't really good in the first place necessarily if they're killing humans, but when the Eternals come in to take care of the deviants basically viewed that as genocide. This deviant Crow that becomes self-aware is going to try to avenge his species. And I thought that was interesting, but he basically starts talking in that one scene, and then at the end he takes on Thena, and that's it. But it could have been a really interesting theme to explore, like, look what you've done to my species, and what did you guys think about that?
It doesn't go through how he's able to do that. Why him? why now? Why not the first deviant they fought? Or, another one of them or something like that. I mean, I guess, this is the first time they actually had one cornered by themselves, maybe. So maybe they all can do it, and he was just the first one to jump in. I don't know, but
I took it like they thought he evolved. And I think there may have even been a line dropped about evolution here, but I think that's what that was supposed to be. He evolved kind of from like a monkey to a man. He evolved from a animal deviant to a equivalent of a human or more human-like deviant.
In the comics, he's the military leader of the deviant race, and he was one of the first Earth deviants created. It says that in the past he has that ability to regenerate, and it says in the past he used to disguise himself as the devil in order to try to influence or frighten humans. So apparently, that's the comic version.
What a great story!
That was a very
and they brought in Bill Skarsgård to play him, and he literally was in there for 30 seconds going.
He had like 5 lines.
I know.
Yeah.
And it also says he has a long-standing relationship, on and off relationship with Thena, which he hides from the other deviants.
Really?
Thena, who's the leader of the Eternals and mother of their twin children, Donald and Deborah Ritter. So apparently he had children with Thena in the comics. Yeah.
Half deviant, half fallen angel.
There's a lot of backstory on this character that we just did not get.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of a waste of the character then.
Pretty much.
And interesting that Thena was the leader of the Eternals because she's not in this film. But if I remember correctly, Angelina Jolie signed a multi-picture deal. I would need to verify that. But if so, like her character might be more in the future, which personally, I'd like to see more of her. I was a little disappointed at first when I found out she wasn't the main character because I expected her to be a central character. But I ended up liking Cersei a lot, so it's all good. But I do want to see more Angelina Jolie.
Watch Gia. Get to see a lot of her there.
Gia? Like literally?
Bad joke.
This says that the reason that he was able to evolve in the film is because when he killed Ajax, he absorbed all of her powers. So that was able to help him and all the other deviants start evolving more to even be able to heal themselves even more.
Well, what kind of power would Ajax, like an Eternal, have? Is it their life force or?
That was her power.
So when he killed her, he could heal himself.
Oh, yeah.
When she's fighting, you can see her healing herself as she's getting...
Athena stabs her.
Yeah, or as she's fighting the deviants. Deviant will claw, and then she'll punch, and then be like healing herself as she goes.
She died, and keep in mind, her death takes place before we see him for the first time when they're in London and he pops out of the water. He had already killed her at that point. We just didn't know it. So then he's healing, and then when he kills Gilgamesh, that's how he's able to gain human form.
So I'm still learning about this movie after I've seen that scene.
And now he's able to vocalize and talk because he wasn't able to before. I mean, this is the movie side of it. The comic was a little bit more, he could always re-heal and he could always talk and all that stuff. But for the movie's sake, this is why he's so much different than all the others. It's because he's able to do these things now, which again would have been nice had they explained a little bit of that.
The second half of a TV series could have been being hunted by Crow, and he's smart and they show that he's intelligent, but they just didn't have the time. There's so much packed in her already. On my first viewing, I knew it was a lot of detail, but then after I knew the characters, when I was rewatching it, like a lot of the lines meant something. So it's just line after line of
important detail.
Yes. So they didn't have time to work another character like that into the movie. But because of that, I feel like maybe he shouldn't have been in here because it just seemed like a side quest that wasn't critical. I liked it up until he evolves. Like they almost could have just cut him there or they killed him, but then they have to deal with the Tiamat thing. Why drag him into the second half of the film as this self-aware being that's going to try to avenge his species if that story arc is not really going to be good? Were you let down by the Crow battle at the end, or were you fine with him being in there?
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with it until we started looking deeper into the deviants and the fact that Crow was, you said he was a military leader, which means he's already able to communicate. Watching this movie, I see deviants as just mindless monsters that kill, where it seems like in the comic, and I want to say, again, I didn't get to do a lot of research, but deviants in the comic books, Thanos is part deviant, I was thinking.
Is he?
I could be wrong on that. But again, it just depends where the MCU wants to take the story compared to the Marvel comic universe, which is also MCU, but whatever.
Something you just said was interesting too. Even though he acquired speech, why is he smart? Like, he was this lizard animal for a while, and now all of a sudden he's like tactical. Where did he get a brain like that?
Maybe he got the brain of Gilgamesh and Ajax
absorbing
as well.
their powers and their abilities. Yeah. I mean, had he killed another one, he would have been, able to do mind control or shoot lasers out of his eyes, depending on who he...
Yeah, if he would have killed Druig, he would have been unstoppable then, right? He could have just... I don't know if Druig can take the mind of a Eternal or not. Well, obviously not. Otherwise, he probably would have, during the fight, grabbed Icarus and been like, hey, just take a nap. I win.
A dirt nap. Well, before I ask if you guys recommend this movie, I wonder if we should share the results of our TikTok poll, because we asked people on the Movies Are Spiritual TikTok page what they thought of this movie. I don't know if you've seen this poll today, but I'm wondering, what do you think won? Recommend or not recommend?
I'm going to probably say recommend, probably one.
I was thinking when I checked a few days ago, it said not recommend was a couple points up, but...
Oh, really?
I'm not sure.
Let's find out. I'm clicking on it right now. 46% of our audience recommended Eternals. 54% said, no way.
And if I hadn't watched it a second time for this podcast, I would have been part of the No Way crew. Again, it's one of those where watch it, enjoy it as a movie, and then watch it again if you're interested in the story, because there is a lot going on in there that will be important for the future of the MCU. A couple hidden scenes, or not hidden, but credit scenes that were important. Introduced the Black Knight, introduced Blade, introduced Eros, Star Fox. The movie is there just to kind of introduce things. And then, like I said, probably going to be ending up where Wolverine gets his claws from as well. This was one of those places where they just kind of planted the seed for a lot of other things. Ironically, which is what Tiamat was trying to do.
Plant a seed in your mind. So we had like 160 participants in that poll too. Yeah. So it's a pretty decent sample.
I fall in the no. I would not recommend it unless you're just an absolute nut over Marvel. In my opinion, this is probably one of the worst Marvel films I've seen. It was the least enjoyable for me. That's just where I fell in. Even after the second time, even though I kind of caught on a little bit more, I thought it just wasn't done well enough. It's just they could have done so much more and they could have done it better, and they didn't.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I think it definitely would have made a better Disney Plus show. We mentioned quite a few storylines that we felt like were not fully developed. Crow, I don't feel like Icarus and Cersei's breakup was developed enough. I don't feel like Angelina Jolie's trauma was explored enough. I mean, it kind of was, but they told us and they didn't show us. And I understand they were trying to conceal the twist of the movie. But I still would have liked to see those memories come back. There was time for that when she gets mad weary again towards the end. Maybe when Erishim reveals the Eternal's purpose, maybe then they should show some of those memories. Maybe they flash back to Angelina Jolie and what she saw. Erishim could be talking to Ajax, and then they show the destruction of another planet through Athena's eyes, and then everybody realizes that's what she saw. That's why she has Mad Weary. Really interesting concept, just not very well developed.
They could have thrown some flashbacks in there, because The first one, you throw in a quick flashback of her reacting to something, and she's standing in front of a building. It's obviously modern. And, it's like, oh, is she seeing the future or something like that? It gives you different options. And then it shows a little bit more. And then finally, when it shows the big reveal, it pans back and it might be a planet. She's in front of a building that has lasers shooting things. And, and then you see an alien race running around. There's ways they could have done it. I think they took on too much and tried to stuff too much info into a small area. So I think we all agree when it comes to that, it would have been a lot better as a Disney Plus show.
I would have liked it better if they also explained why Icarus is so for this cause of having Tiamat be born. Is he afraid of the Celestials? Has something happened in his past where he's like, I must see this through? If it were a TV show, I bet you we get a whole episode about his breakup with Cersei and why he chooses the path he chooses. Because I'm kind of missing that. I wasn't crazy about Sprite. I didn't really like her in certain places. It's mainly an acting thing. But there was a lot that I did like. I mean, I liked Kingo. Unfortunately, they didn't keep him in the end of the film because he and his assistant were hilarious. The whole Bollywood thing. And when we were looking into what Bollywood is, it's Indian Hollywood, right? So we found like a Superman movie with Spider Woman that had dancing in it, and we determined that what he was doing in that film was pretty much what they do in their Bollywood films.
Always dancing, always singing. They're huge productions. Something we don't understand, we don't get. Yeah, I mean, I've tried watching it. It's just like, but it's not what I grew up on. It's interesting, but it's not something like, okay, what Bollywood movie am I watching today? Yeah. No, it's just like
YouTube it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the modern movies, battle scenes are insane. There's this one that had to have thousands and thousands of people, and they're like shooting these huge arrows, and these arrows have these sheets on them. So they're flying through the air, and these huge sheets are flying over, and these sheets are soaked with gasoline, and it covers like 500 soldiers, and then the flaming arrows come out and catch the sheet on fire, and just insane stuff.
Well, I thought the CGI in places didn't look great. Like some of the battle scenes didn't seem, especially with the deviants didn't look quite right to me. Maybe it was the physics. Maybe it was that they didn't have the budget that they had on Infinity War. So maybe I'm spoiled and I expect everything to look as good as Thanos did. But that's part of why Crow did not really catch me that well. And I thought maybe it would have been better to just cut that because he doesn't really look that great. Mm-hmm. When somebody's fighting a CGI beast and I know there's nothing there when they're acting, it shows. That was something that bothered me with the Hobbit films. This film had some things going against it, but for me, looking at it as a spiritual film, knowing the theology behind the movie, I found it really interesting to try to trace, if these Eternals are angels, then what is the film saying? And how are they going to manage humanity? I thought that was really interesting to watch. And the second time I watched the film, knowing the different characters' personalities a little bit more, the earlier film scenes that didn't mean as much to me at the time were more interesting. And I liked this world. I think it was too much packed into one film. So I'll recommend it, but I'll say you have to be patient with it. And it's not a perfect film, but I would like to see more of Eternals somehow, whether or not it be in other Marvel films or sequel or TV show. I would like to see more of Cersei. I wasn't crazy about all the characters, but definitely want to see more Cersei and Athena.
I do recommend this higher than I did The Matrix Resurrection. I'll say that.
Yeah. Keep the characters, build up their backstory a little bit more. If Marvel can do that, maybe tweak Sprite a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to see these characters go on. But very interesting on a theological level.
Absolutely.
So I would be very curious to see if any of you listeners saw anything different in this film, or if there are any spiritual themes that you saw that we didn't, Or maybe you didn't know these themes were there and that this movie was inspired by them. So I'm curious to see how you would view the movie after knowing that. If you enjoyed this podcast, help us build this channel so we can continue making more by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Movies Are Spiritual. Like this video, and we thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.